Yeah, I would say I would want people to say that I created opportunities for other people, whether it's through employment, whether it's to try their hand at professional sports, opening certain doors. I think for me that would be important. Just like being able to say like, yeah, the path I walked, I was able to create opportunities for other people. My name is Sandra Kimokoti. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Twende Sports, where I oversee revenue and brand. My journey with sports began in primary school. I played basketball, I ran track, same as high school. And then I went to the US for undergrad. And so when I got there, I realized I did not have the height or the skill to play college ball in the US. But I was looking for a team sport just to, stay fit, give me a sense of community. And I saw posters on campus, like, come try rugby. So I went one day, like, I didn't even have the boots, I just had like regular sports shoes. And then the coach had me like tackle somebody, and then she just said, come back tomorrow. And that's how I started playing rugby, my first week of college. So I played all through college, and then 2014, joined the Kenya team, played for them in 2014 and 2016. That was my foray into rugby. But then, I finished school 2015, and so 2016 was really me trying to balance like a career playing rugby for Kenya and then also working in management consulting at the time. And it was really hard. Like, those two things are difficult enough on their own, and then trying to do them together was just too time consuming. I felt like I didn't have any time for family, and so like one thing had to give. And at the time, the national team was paying the women's team 12,000 shillings a month. So it wasn't a very difficult choice of which one to stick to. So December 2016, I hung my boots, so said goodbye to my rugby career and said, let me focus on this other job that actually pays the bills. But then 2 years into the consulting job, so this is end of 2017, I kind of knew, okay, I think I want to spend more time in sports, as a career and not as an athlete, this time on the business side of things. And the motivation was really just to understand, like, why could our foundation only afford to pay us 12,000 shillings a month? Like, what does it look like on the business side of things in sports when it's working well? So I decided at that point that I was going to spend some more time in the sports industry, but I didn't really know how to make the transition. Do I go back to school for it? Do I just try and get a job in sports in Kenya? So I did some research and sort of came to the conclusion that I think I want to do a master's in sports business. But I felt I still had some like growing up to do professionally. So I stayed in my job for another 3.5 years. And then in August 2021, then I went back to the US, so to New York, and I did a master's in sports business at NYU. And then while I was there, I spent, my grad school time interning as well for an agency on that side called Elevate Sports. So my job there, I was working for their insights department. So they do strategy for professional and collegiate teams in the US and in Europe. And so that was a really eye-opening experience for me. I was doing things like sponsorship valuation. So if a corporate wants to put their logo on like a college team's basketball court, how do they charge for that, We were doing things like stadium feasibility studies, so working with an architect. So the architect would, let's say, be responsible for the design, but we were responsible for the fan engagement and fan survey. So understanding from fans, like, what do you want to see in a stadium? Like, how much are you willing to pay for seats? How much are you willing to pay for concessions? Like, what kind of experience do you want to be having in the stadium? And then after graduating, from the master's, I spent a year in New York working with a startup sports league, this time in cycling. So there I was the chief of staff. I was helping the CEO raise capital. It was a venture-funded sports league, so it was good exposure to how a league works, but also how a venture-funded company also operates. So I did that for a year. But then the story of Twende Sports really began when I was still in school, sort of end of 2022. That's when I was introduced to my co-founder, Colin, and the other two co-founders, Kush and Steven. And at the time, Colin was actually working for a different sports startup. They were trying to set up academies in the country. And it wasn't going the way he had wanted, but he'd been passionate about basketball for a very long time. And he said to me, I was volunteering with them. So I was just like helping them on the side as I was doing school. And he said, hey, I want to start this thing, just focusing on basketball in Kenya. Would you be willing to join me? And I said, absolutely, right? I think just the idea of building something for the sports ecosystem in Kenya that would, also give young people a chance to have a sports career here. Like, be able to have have sports be your full-time job without leaving the country was a very compelling proposition for me, and being able to give people that chance that I felt I didn't have when I was an athlete. Yeah, so we started Twende Sports in January 2023, and then in August of that year, we acquired Nairobi City Thunder, and we made it a fully professional basketball team. So that means all the players, all the coaches are on professional contracts. They get a salary at the end of every month. And then about a year later, July 2024, we won the Men's Premier League, undefeated. It was the team's first trophy in 24 years. Last was in 2000, and so it was a really good run for us, 18 months, a trophy in the bag. And so once you win your local league, you get a chance to play in the Basketball Africa League qualifiers. So Basketball Africa League, BAL in short, is an NBA-run league in Africa. So NBA started NBA Africa to just really capitalize on the basketball talent and potential on the African continent. So every year, 12 teams compete for the championship. No Kenyan team had ever qualified before us. So when we won the local championship, we got to play in like regional qualifiers. So you play other club teams, other top club teams in the region. And then December, we became the first Kenyan team to qualify for BL. So this year, April to June, we'll be competing in the BL. I would say there's underinvestment in sports, and there's, I think, sometimes an attitude that sports is just a recreational or an amateur activity and not really a view of this is actually a commercial enterprise. And how do you capitalize on it to generate, an income, generate revenue? So I think that mentality, it has been a big sort of like blocker in the ecosystem. Two, I would say facilities. Like Nairobi and Kenya in general has a big lack of sports facilities. So even in basketball, for example, all the games are played at Nyayo Stadium, right? Nyayo Stadium has a capacity of about 1,000 people, the basketball arena of Nyayo Stadium. But when we were playing our BL qualifiers, the turnout was, about 3,000 people, right? And so it actually limits the fandom because you can't give fans an ideal experience. Sometimes the roof is leaking, sometimes the lights are not fixed, and so there's a big infrastructure problem, and that actually affects teams, right? You can't really monetize, you can't charge premium ticketing prices for a subpar venue experience. You can't do like really cool, in-stadium experiences because the facility is just not great. So I'd say facilities is another big challenge. Yeah. So I think if you look at the sports ecosystem, there's very few people that are ever going to be professional athletes. The majority of people that play sports in primary school, high school, college are never going to be pro. And so you have to think about it as, what does sports do for the individual and the community beyond, the less than 1% that actually become pro athletes? There's values like discipline, teamwork, self-belief that we think are actually really important to developing the individual. And for me, it's, it was a part of my own journey. A lot of my own like self-confidence, self-belief, just perseverance came from being a rugby player. And so for us, it's also important, even as we are building a commercial enterprise, to be able to give back to the community and think about how we're using sports to, nurture individuals into just holistic people. And sports, it's been shown to have like really positive social impacts, right? Like reducing crime, improving mental health, just like moving physically actually reduces your stress levels, improves your physical health. But also for us, we see it as, we have Nairobi City Thunder, which is the professional team, but you need to also build a pipeline of talent on the back of that, right? So we need to think about, okay, we have Thunder today, they're doing well, but 2-5 years down the line, where's the talent for that coming from? So it's important to actually build a youth talent pipeline that then sort of feeds into a more professional ecosystem. Yeah, so right now, the pro team is just a men's team, and we have an amateur, and on the amateur side we have a men's and women's team. But the goal is down the line to also be able to put up a women's pro team that can also play in the Premier League. I think a lot of times we are sold the idea that it's an either-or choice. Like you have to pick one thing, and that's the thing that you will die with. So I think what I would say is, life is long and life is there for the living. And nobody can limit you other than yourself. And so you have the option to explore multiple interests. So if you, for example, want to play volleyball, want to be a biochemist, you can actually do both those things. Like nothing is preventing you from doing both those things. And then at a different point in life, you can decide maybe that one takes precedence over the other, right? But I think that this notion that like you can only be one thing is really damaging, and I think it holds a lot of people back from, you know, exploring their full potential. I think in different seasons of life, one thing might become more important than the other, and at that point, you just make that choice. For me, I would tell young people, explore your interests as much as possible. Like explore anything that you're remotely interested in, give it a shot, see if you enjoy it. And sometimes you do something not because it's a career path or not because it will make you money, right? I think that the idea that you should do something just because it will make you money is also a harmful idea. I think it's okay to do things just because you enjoy them, right? If I enjoy painting, doesn't mean that I have to monetize the painting. I might actually not be a good painter, but I enjoy it, right? There's value in me doing it just because it fulfills me and for no other reason. And I would say that I think people should be given the opportunity to explore their passions just because of the enjoyment. They enjoy them, yeah. So I'd say number one is we want to be the biggest brand in African basketball. We want Nairobi City Thunder to be the biggest brand in African basketball. Number two, we want to be a household name. So the same way in Kenya, if somebody says Gor or Ingwe, like you know what that team is. You're not like, is that a cricket team? So even when somebody hears Nairobi City Thunder, it's not like, okay, what team is this? So we want Thunder to be a household name in Kenya. Then I would say three, we want to, you know, see youth impact in the thousands, right? The young folk coming through our programs, you know, pre-teens to late teens, we want to be able to say that we've impacted thousands of young people positively, whether it's through, you know, camps, basketball clinics, community projects. So even if you don't get a chance to play for any of our pro teams or any of our amateur teams, like you are still a part of our ecosystem, and you can say actually our programming in basketball has touched your life in a positive way. And then I think for just to show that you can invest in sports in this market and have it actually do well, right? And prove that there's value for other people, you know, for private capital to come into sports and see rewards in that space. Yeah, because we need a lot more investment in sports teams and in the sports ecosystem in Kenya and in Africa. Yeah, so our hope is that we'd actually spur other people to do the same. Yeah, I think it's really an energy balance, and in different seasons of life, there'll be different things that energize you more than others, and it's okay to prioritize certain things at different times. I was listening to an interview by a certain lady, Patricia Ithao, and she was talking about this work-life balance concept as rooms in a house. When you have a house, you're not limited to like the kitchen or the living room or the bedroom. Every room has a function, and you spend time in that room depending on what you need to be doing at a particular time. And sometimes you'll be spending more time in the study room, and sometimes you'll be spending more time in the kitchen. And I think life is like that. Like there's all these rooms or segments of your life, and you spend time in each accordingly. So I think for me, it's just really about giving myself the space to do the things that I feel energize me, right? In certain seasons, I'll feel like, actually, I want to focus more on family and community right now. In certain seasons, I want to spend a bit more time on the career front or just building my physical health. And so like all those things, all those rooms are important, but in different seasons, some might take precedence over others. In an alternate universe, I'd have enough passive income to not need a job. So I'd just be gardening and frolicking in the gardens and enjoying the sun. Yeah. My view on this might not be maybe like the common position. For me, I think that this is fundamentally a justice question. And I think we need to create a world where when you think about creating opportunity, it's not a dichotomy, you know? Like you have to think about how you're creating opportunity for everybody in society. And so even as you talk about gender balance, it's like, okay, you're talking about women in urban areas, women in rural areas, men, right, young men in urban areas. If you think about the young male demographic in Kenya and young female demographic in Kenya, they face different unique challenges. And I think that we need just like a maybe a paradigm shift that we ask ourselves, like, what does a just society look like? And then taking that beyond, the big decision makers in corporate to actually a community level, like the kinds of decisions being made at like a school level, right, at a ward level. And what does like justice and inclusion look like in those spaces, I think will sort of help us get to the world that we want to get to a lot faster. I think a lot of times we allow ourselves to be pigeonholed into false dichotomies, and I think we need to just really fundamentally change how we think about our society. Yeah. I think that what's needed, in my view, is there needs to be a certain level of ownership by the state and our government of our own destinies, right? Like, I don't think anybody wants to be in a position where you're relying on somebody else's goodwill for survival, right? And I think we need to think about how are we supporting ourselves internally, and it's about saying we think we are worth investing in ourselves, and I think that's something that we need to start seeing at a governmental level. I think for Twende Sports, right now, we run as a commercial enterprise, right? As a private entity, so we are not reliant on like donor aid or anything like that. But there's, we have youth programs that we run, and down the line, we'd hope to, for example, like raise grant funding to keep those programs running. I think it'll be interesting to see how that space evolves. So either, for example, there's a situation where either other partners also start saying, oh, we want to focus on our own citizens, and so we don't want to like give aid to like foreign countries and foreign entities. There's also a world in which you might see people start to say, oh, actually, let's step in and fill the gap that has been left by, other people exiting. And that could be either like, other development partners, people that are just like philanthropic capital, global foundations. And so I think, I'm curious to see how the space evolves. It's hard to predict how that will go. But I think for me, what I would say is like, it would be irresponsible to leave our destiny in the hands of other people. And we need to start thinking through like, how do we support ourselves? And it just comes down to taking responsibility for our own lives. And we have to hold our government to account. We can't hold a foreign government to account before we hold the people that we voted for to account.